What's up, guys? I wanted to talk a little bit about the latest news coming out of the 2K camp and with the next NBA 2K game. Uh, Apparently, they are adding commercials to the game. Commercials that you can't skip. I think they are going to be part of loading screens, and some of you may not think that's such a big deal. You might say, well, if you're just sitting there waiting for a screen to load, who cares? The thing is that you can't skip these commercials. And even once the game loads to where it's supposed to go, nothing's going to happen until the commercial ends. So you can't skip the commercial. You are at the mercy of the length of time this commercial is playing. It just gets worse and worse. Every fucking day, these people are coming up with new ways of ripping consumers off. Now, you're not paying extra for this stuff, so you might say, well, how am I getting ripped off? There's just something annoying they're adding to the game. But it's ways for them to make money at your expense. Your time is money. And if you got to sit through a commercial just to continue your way through a game, there's value to that. And I've been talking about this for a long time. Those of you who've watched my videos for years, you know that I've talked about DLC. I've railed against it. I've been talking about this from the early days when this shit started. And, in the beginning, people would be like, hey, what's your problem? If you don't like it, don't buy it. It's just, $2, $3 for this, $2 or $3 for that. And it was always something meaningless like skins or something that really didn't have anything to do with the game. It was just like some added, feature that, not a feature, just something visual, that you didn't have to do it. But my point was always that when you reward that bullshit, it never stops. It just goes from they're going to keep moving the goalposts. So what's acceptable today, they're going to push that. And what isn't acceptable today or doesn't seem to be acceptable is going to be acceptable tomorrow. Because they're never going to stop. They're used to making all this extra money now. The business model has changed. There used to be a time when it was just about game sales. You developed the game, you released it, and then you wait for the sales numbers to come in, and that's how you made your profit. So the better of a game that the product was, the better the game was, it would sell more copies, and you'd make more money. It's not like that anymore. The game itself, the initial purchase price of a game is just the beginning. This grab for your money, to squeeze your wallet, it never ends. Even after you paid $60 for the game. And then you had loot boxes and microtransactions. Now you have EA actually saying, well, it's not loot boxes, it's surprise mechanics. It's ridiculous the type of shit they're coming up with, the lengths they are willing to go to excuse their predatory bullshit. But it's gotten out of control. As I predicted, I told people, don't buy these trinkets. They don't mean anything. They don't do anything to improve your gaming experience. And even though it's not a lot of money to you, that's not the point. The point is that you are rewarding these people for doing something that is only going to get worse. So now these games are affected at a deeper level. Now there is content that is held out of games so that you could pay for it later as an add-on. Now there are ways to give you an unbalanced sense of competition in games where you don't really get to have the maximum the the maximum amount of attributes or skills or weapons, whatever the shit is in any particular game that's going to give you that competitive edge unless you pay for it. It's extra. And I'm not surprised at all about these commercials. Not at all. 2K's doing it. It's going to happen. And guess what? You think EA and all these other companies are going to look at that and say, fuck it, we're doing that too. Why not? And this is all because people didn't listen in the beginning. When people like myself were saying, hey, don't reward these people for bullshit, for DLC and all this fucking garbage. If you don't buy that stuff, they'll stop making it. They'll stop implementing it because if they're not making money off of it, it takes resources for them to add this shit to these games. To come up with ways of doing this shit. And if they see that we're not biting, it'll go away. The problem is that as consumers, we don't have any sense of control. We see a shiny new object, we have to have it. We just can't sit there and not buy this shit. Now I say we because I'm being fair as a generalization, you know. I don't fucking do that shit. I buy DLC once in a blue moon if I feel it really is going to add something. There is some DLC out there that does add something to your gaming experience. But not trinkets and bullshit. And definitely not microtransactions and loot boxes and all this other shit that is just a way to bridge that gap for the player from you know, being able to compete at the highest level and have the game balanced. They purposely make these games unbalanced so that you have to get this stuff if you want to enjoy the game at all. Now, this commercial bullshit, I'm telling you guys, it's just gonna keep getting worse. Now, here's something that really bothers me. I'm hoping that Sony and Microsoft actually step in and actually send a message to these developers to not do this, because one of the biggest features of this next gen for both the PS5 and the next Xbox, whatever they're going to call it, is the implementation of a solid state drive, which makes everything load faster. In fact, Sony has already been boasting as one of its biggest features that we may not have load times anymore. How much of a true statement that is, I always take these things with a grain of salt. You know, I always expect that these guys are going to embellish a little bit and just overhype something. But even if it's not completely eliminating load times, it's going to dramatically reduce it so that there's less time of you sitting around waiting for certain things to load and just enjoying the game. But what's going to happen is with these fucking commercials, it's going to be the same thing like having load times anyway. Which really diminishes this huge feature for these next-gen consoles. For me, I'm only speaking for myself, that's one of the most exciting things I heard about these next-gen consoles, besides all the extra, you know, hardware performance and power. But just hearing that these load times are going to be virtually eliminated. So what happens when 2K comes out and they force feed these commercials into these games? You're still going to be sitting around. Sony and Microsoft, I'm hoping they're paying attention and they take this serious, because this is going to do this is a big blow to them. This whole thing they're touting with these solid state drives and these load times, then you're going to have developers force feeding commercials into these games. That's not good. That's not good for Sony or Microsoft. That's a huge selling point that's going to be eliminated. And some people are going to say, why the fuck am I going to get these next gen consoles if I'm still going to sit around through commercials? I'm just saying, these are possible, things that I see coming. Another thing I talked about, I did a video maybe a year or two ago. It was a long time ago. And I was talking about the gaming industry and the things that were happening. And one of the things I brought up was it was actually a prediction that I made. And it seemed far-fetched at the time, but I'm more and more convinced that, I'm telling you, I see it happening. And the thing I'm talking about is, I brought up this idea that I felt that the gaming industry was heading to a direction where you're not going to own anything anymore. Like now, you buy a game, it's yours. But even now, we're losing that, because some of these games you can't even play unless you have an internet connection, even if you're playing offline. Because they want to verify who's playing the game, that it's not just someone else that you gave the game to. It's just getting worse and worse. So, the next step in the evolution is, and I said this, you're not going to own games anymore. They may not even sell them to you. They may only be available as rentals. And I'm telling you now, they're going to push these services, these rental services, and the only way you're going to be able to play these games is by renting them. And it might only be $1 or $2 a day, or you may be paying that monthly subscription fee to a service like the PlayStation Now or whatever the fuck Microsoft has cooking. But I talked about this like almost 2 years ago, and I'm starting to see more and more that we are headed in that direction. And I can totally see that. And if you still think I'm being crazy, those of you who've heard of this new console / streaming thing called Stadia by Google, they're getting into the gaming business, right? And their service is not selling games. It's not gonna be buying these games. You're gonna be streaming, playing them through a streaming service, like a cloud gaming service. So, if you get this Stadia thing, you're not going to have virtual copies of games or on your hard drive. You're not going to be paying $60 for a game. You're going to be paying this Stadia thing, service, and streaming games. And it's so serious that Sony and Microsoft actually got together, and they are working on this cloud gaming thing, right? Because both Sony and Microsoft bring something to the table in terms of online gaming and where they're pushing things. Why do you think they're pushing all in this direction? Because they are planning for a time when you're as a consumer, it's not even going to be available to you to buy physical copies of games or even digital copies. You're only going to be able to play these games by renting them. Either renting games directly, individually, or as part of a subscription service, which they're going to try to force feed down your throat because it's going to be cheaper. Could you imagine a game like Grand Theft Auto, which is still popular, still has full lobbies, even all these years after its release? A game like that only being available as part of a subscription service, they would make a killing, because $60, that initial copy, yeah, they made more money than any game in history. But there's even more money if instead of selling you the game, you have to rent it, or it's part of a rental service. And that $60, they'll make that shit back beyond the first year. Because people are playing this game for years. I still play the game. And I bought it when it came out. And then I bought it for the PS4. So I'm telling you guys, this is where the industry's headed. I don't know if we're going to be able to stop that, but we could damn sure put a stop to things like these commercials. How do we do that? There's only one way. You got to control that fucking urge to buy games that you don't need. The next NBA 2K game, we should boycott that. And there are people already making videos about all this. Just do a YouTube search. So I'm not the first to talk about this. I'm not the first to even suggest a boycott. I'm just joining this thing. I'm not giving my fucking hard-earned money to these people for this garbage. And if that means I have to live with not being able to play a game, so be it. Because the bigger picture is more important. And when it comes to these yearly games, these yearly sports titles, they're the worst offenders because they don't really give you a big difference from year to year. So if you bought a game this year, the next year it's not going to be that much better. It's only going to have small little improvements and updated rosters. Can you live without that? Seriously? I think we could. I don't know, man. I haven't bought an NBA 2K game I don't think I bought either of the last two. And once I saw what they did, I don't remember if it was last year or the year before with this, it's all microtransactions. But where they created this fucking neighborhood type of thing where you actually have to go out and go from one thing to the next just to go to different parts of the game. So in other words, if you wanted to go to my park, you had to go out and go through town. It's like it just took a long time, right? It literally just wasting time just to get to my park and then to go to my career. You had to go over. They actually had this thing where you could buy a bicycle just to get from one place to the next faster. And of course, you need VC, those virtual coins or whatever the fuck virtual currency that 2K does. This is basically spitting in your face, laughing at you, and just saying, hand over your fucking money. You're a fucking schmuck. And that was so insulting to me. And I said, I'm no more. This company has become so toxic. Just like EA, just like all these other companies. I'm not going to give them my money. And you guys know how supportive I am of NASCAR video games. And if they ever get to the point where they start doing all this microtransaction bullshit, it's over. It's over. I don't give a fuck. I'll stay playing the old games if I have to. Even though they are nowhere near what they should be, I'm not going to give my hard-earned money for garbage to get ripped off. So far, 704 has kept it to a minimum with this DLC, with these paint schemes. I'm not a fan of it. I don't support it. And I actually talked about one of the things that they falsely advertised, which was adding these fucking extra paint schemes, or not paint schemes, but those custom templates that they promised people that was going to be part of this DLC. They released the DLC. Nobody got these extra custom templates, which people want to customize their cars. So they screwed people on that. I haven't seen anyone else really talk about that. Maybe nobody cares. Maybe I'm the only one who was bothered by that. But so be it. This is getting really bad. And it's just going to get worse unless we are willing to tell these guys, fuck you, you're not getting my money. So when they release the next NBA 2K game, they need to feel the pain financially that people decided, we're not going to buy this. We're not going to support this. pay $60 for a game that force feeds commercials to you that you can't skip. I don't know what words to use for that. Outrageous seems too mild of a word for that. I don't know what to say, man, but it's really getting bad. And if we don't do something about it, and we do have power, we have purchasing power. You know, these people, these corporations, this is all part of their bottom line now. Once they got used to making that money off DLC, they're just gonna keep pushing the goalpost, and they're gonna continue to see other ways to fuck people and try to squeeze more money out of them. And then you get these regurgitated garbage games every year, and then they're just shoehorning more and more microtransactions in there, and now you got commercials. It wasn't enough for them. They weren't making enough money. Where does it end? And just when you think they can't come up with something else, they do. And it's not surprising to me at all. But I'm not giving them my money. And I really urge you guys to resist the temptation. You don't need this next game. It's not really going to add anything that you didn't get before on an older game. I hope that more people decide, fuck that, I'm not buying this garbage. So that's it. I wanted to talk about that. And I'm telling you guys, don't be surprised. We're going to get to a point eventually where you're going to your only access is going to be through rentals. They don't want us to own anything anymore. I don't know what else to say. I look forward to your comments. Let me know what you guys think.